after the ruling ANC had adopted a policy of land expropriation without compensation at its 54th National Conference in December 2017, Cyril Ramaphosa, its newly elected president, said that redistributing land from white landowners to black people would increase food production and that South Africa could turn into the ultimate paradise if the implementation of the policy of expropriation of land without compensation leads to higher food production. He added, "We can make this country the Garden of Eden." On 27 February 2018, the South African Parliament adopted a motion that a process had to be started to amend Section 25, the Property Rights Clause, of the South African Constitution to provide for expropriation of land without compensation. Shortly thereafter, David Mabuza, the Deputy President of South Africa, threatened white farmers with a violent takeover should they not volunteer to hand over some of their land. It is argued that this policy must be implemented so that more black South Africans can own property. It is, however, evident from public statements and the policy documents of the ruling ANC that the intention is for the state, not the private individual, to own the land. This point is further proven by the fact that a mere 6.3% of land bought by the state has to date been transferred to private ownership. Furthermore, the call for expropriation of private property is usually framed as a necessary step to undo the history of injustices in terms of land ownership in South Africa. However, it ignores the fact that a restitution program has been in place for more than a quarter of a century, according to which 1.8 million black South Africans had already received compensation. The Restitution of Land Rights Act of 1994 provides for people to institute claims for land that they had been deprived of as a result of racially discriminatory practices, such as forced removals. 82% of land claims were for urban land rather than rural land. Furthermore, what came as a source of frustration to the government was the fact that over 90% of those who had instituted land claims indicated that they were not really interested in owning agricultural land and that they would rather prefer money as compensation. The government responded angrily to this, stating that black people's preference for money over land was hurting land reform. Beki Mbili, in charge of land restitution support in KwaZulu-Natal, explained what black land claimants said. He said, "Many of the claimants already have small pieces of land, and some don't even live on those areas where their forefathers were removed from. Some say to us that they don't want more land than they already own, and the risk involved if they ask us to buy them those huge pieces of land that will go out of production." He then explained why this was a problem for the government. The problem with this is that if you look at the outcome of the first phase of the land audit, the amount of land that is private land, particularly that is owned by white people in this country, is still in the region between 70 and 80%. We can only change the land ownership pattern if people opt for restoration. If they opt for financial compensation, the pattern stays the same. If you take the money, you don't dent the problem that currently exists. Notwithstanding the fact that the figures of white land ownership provided by Mbili are inflated, because at least 34.5% of all land in South Africa and 26.7% of agricultural land in South Africa is black owned. Notwithstanding the fact that the figures of white land ownership provided by Mbili are inflated, because at least 34.5% of land in South Africa and 26.7% of agricultural land is black owned. The problem is therefore that the South African government is dedicated to reducing the amount of land owned by white people, while this is not regarded as a priority by the majority of black South Africans. This is also evident from the rapid pace at which urbanization among black South Africans is taking place. Black South Africans, more than any other group, appear to desire to live in cities rather than rural areas. From 2000 to 2015, the population of black South Africans in Johannesburg increased by 76.7%. The corresponding number for Cape Town is 122.4% and for Pretoria, 71.6%. In the same period, the number of white people in Johannesburg declined by 8.1% and in Cape Town by 0.7%. In Pretoria, the number of white people increased by a mere 2.7%. The South African Institute of Race Relations surveyed South Africans and asked them what they believed had to be done to improve their lives. Only 8% of them indicated that they believed that land reform would improve people's lives. The survey also found that a mere 2% of people in South Africa want land distribution to be a top priority for the South African government. It is noteworthy that according to this survey, white South Africans regard land reform as a more pressing issue to be resolved than black South Africans. According to the South African government, almost 8 million hectares, about 9% of agricultural land, have already been distributed to black African people. However, it is also admitted that more than 90% of farms distributed by the state to black African communities had failed and usually revert very quickly to either subsistence farming or to squatter camps. A 2017 study by the Land Bank found that of the approximately 4,000 farms that had been acquired since 1994 at a cost of 10 billion rands, only 10% were still productive. While the South African government already spent more than 45 billion on land reform, only 6.3% of the land that were acquired by the state have been transferred to private owners. The statement in 2018 by Zweli Mkhize, Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, that no property of any black person or black group would be expropriated, further gives a racial dimension to government's expropriation plans. According to a 2017 land audit by Agri-SA, black South Africans own more than or almost half of all agricultural land in 3 of South Africa's most fertile provinces: the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and KwaZulu-Natal. Furthermore, landowners who are not white control more than 46% of South Africa's agricultural potential. In KwaZulu-Natal alone, 45.4% of agricultural land is owned by black people. This represents 73.5% of the agricultural potential of the province. A special report by the Centre for Development and Enterprise of 2018 states that a total of 17.4 million hectares have been transferred from white ownership since 1994, which is equal to 21% of the 82.76 million hectares of farmland in freehold in South Africa. Furthermore, 24.03% of land in South Africa is state-owned. It is quite disheartening that the motion to review Section 25 of the Constitution disregarded the facts about the real progress that has already been made with land restitution and ignored some of the financial realities of farming. My name is Ernst and this is your fact sheet.